What is your relationship with the Gauteng Health MEC?
No, I don't have a relationship with her.
You've got no relationship whatsoever?
No, not at all, sir.
Do you know her? Have you ever met her?
Yes, I know her as at a distance. Yes, I know her.
That's our specialist investigative journalist Jeff Wicks questioning businesswoman Nhlake Priscilla Mothobuka about her relationship with Gauteng Health MEC Nomantu Nkomo-Ralehoko after she had bagged a R2.5 million t-shirt tender from the department. Yet, the businesswoman's dormant company was only re-registered for trading just a few months prior.
What our story seeks to expose is that over and over again, those in close proximity to ANC leaders seem to benefit when it comes to procurement from the public purse.
We chat with Wicks next. And later in the show, the Deputy President claims he'd be ashamed to be a DA minister today. And the Fab Four finally returned to the silver screen in 2028. To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, please hit the follow button on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer. Let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. It'll cost R280 each to supply some 8,500 golf t-shirts for the Gauteng Health Department staff over the next 3 years. This is apparently what makes up the bulk of a R2.5 million tender that businesswoman Nhlake Priscilla Mothobuka had scored with the Gauteng Health Department just late last year. But Mothobuka insists MEC Nomantu Nkomo-Ralehoko is just someone she casually bumped into in the past. However, our man, specialist investigative journalist Jeff Wicks, has evidence to the contrary. He joins me now from our Johannesburg studios. How's it, Jeff? Thanks so much for your time, and how are you doing today?
Thank you for having me, Graeme. It's always a good day to be a journalist in South Africa, so 100%.
Can't agree more. Take us through your investigation. Who is this businesswoman, Miss Mothobuka? And she has links to the ANC, although not overtly senior links to the party, but on more of a branch level. Is that right?
Yeah, so outwardly, Ms. Mothobuka is a businesswoman, and she is the controlling mind of two entities, according to the Companies and Intellectual Properties Commission. And she's a branch member in good standing of a branch of the African National Congress in the southern reaches of Johannesburg. It also appears to us that she is in relatively close proximity to the Gauteng Health MEC. And that is the sting, essentially, in our story this morning. It's about their proximity to one another. Now, these two women were at pains to say that there's no real relationship between them. They're not friends. They don't share any sort of closeness whatsoever. But we managed to come across social media postings which tell a very different story.
Absolutely. We're going to get to that in the next short while, but I thought let's just have a look at her business, Mojaji Creations and Consultants. It was founded in 2013, but essentially you had uncovered that after subsequently failing to submit successive financial records or returns for many years, that the company had then become defunct or deregistered, or even dormant, if you'd like, with the Companies and Intellectual Properties Commission. In other words, Mojaji was not trading for a while. She then re-registers the company and then 6 months later gets this lucrative tender.
That's the nub of things. I mean, when you look at a business's track record, it's important to understand that we should look 2 years, or we shouldn't only confine ourselves to the immediate period when the tender is awarded. And we went a bit further. We went back more than 10 years. And we could see that this was an entity which, for all intents and purposes, had become dormant many times for failing to submit its annual financial returns and for failure to pay its fees. And I think the most critical aspect is that it was, in fact, completely deregistered. The company ceased to exist less than a year before this tender was awarded. And to her credit, Ms. Mothobuka seemed to think that this was completely normal. And she normalized her relationship with the CIPC and got back to trading right before she got this massive windfall, which is, a wonderful coincidence.
Now let's talk about the businesswoman's proximity to the Gauteng Health MEC. I think we should play the recording of your conversation. It's live on the News 24 front page this morning regarding your conversation with the businesswoman, where you sort of meet for the first time, you're putting questions to her and her proximity to the MEC. Let's quickly play that clip first and then we'll get your reaction, Jeff.
Hi, I'm looking for Priscilla.
Speaking.
Good morning, Priscilla. You're speaking with Jeff Wicks. I'm an investigative journalist from News 24. How are you?
Good evening, sir.
Not too bad. Ma'am, are you the director of Mojaji Creations and Consultants?
Yeah.
Okay. You recently were awarded a contract or tender to provide shirts for the Gauteng Department of Health.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ma'am, I just have some questions. The technical questions I will send you via email. But a very narrow issue I just wanted to talk to you about on the phone is, what is your relationship with the Gauteng Health MEC?
No, I don't have the relationship with her.
You've got no relationship whatsoever.
No, not at all, sir.
Do you know her? Have you ever met her?
Yes, I know her as at a distance. Yes, I know her.
At a distance. But you wouldn't say that you're friends.
Eh?
Would you say that you two are friends?
Friends to such big people, you.
Okay.
Your reaction there, Jeff, what are your findings show of the pair's closeness? You turned to social media to fill that, right?
Yeah, I think our first port of call was going to both of the parties and trying to understand their relationship and saying, are you in fact friends? They, of course, deny that they're friends. They deny any form of closeness. But their social media postings, which they themselves publish, tell a very different story. We can see from Ms. Mothobuka's Facebook profile that she is a friend of the MEC. We know that they hold court after hours in social settings. We know that they run into each other at ANC events. And, I think what's important to really isolate here, Graeme, is that we can't conclusively say that there was any malfeasance or wrongdoing in the awarding of this tender. What our story seeks to expose is that over and over again, those in close proximity to ANC leaders seem to benefit when it comes to procurement from the public purse. And, I hope that Ms. Mothobuka delivers on this tender. It's a significant amount of money, and it will provide uniforms for 8,500 Gauteng Department of Health staff. What gives me disquiet is the fact that she struggled to keep this business afloat for the preceding decade. And it may have been a going concern when she won the tender, but who's to say that she doesn't run into trouble, and especially of administrative issues that she clearly had before. And I think that's where we need to turn our focus to is the way things are procured in the state. And again, we have another instance where those who are very close to the political levers of power seem to benefit, and that's problematic.
And none of those shirts at this stage, Jeff, to our understanding, have been manufactured as yet, right? As per this tender that was awarded in November, correct?
Correct. So Ms. Mothobuka says she's yet to receive any of the base orders, which is not surprising. And when we questioned her, we did say, are you in textiles? Is this your wheelhouse that you'll be operating in? And she was insistent that, of course, yes, this company, Mojaji Creations and Solutions, although it doesn't spell it out, has been in the textile space, and she has a factory, because we asked her if she would be making these t-shirts. 280 Rand for a golf shirt is not an obnoxious overpricing of things, but there are, of course, ways in which these things can be manipulated, not to say that there will be in this case. But I think the primary issue is, the reliability of this company to deliver on the tender. And it's not as if it was a company that had for the past 15 years been operating and had no issues with the CIPC. This is a company that clearly had problems. And then within months, they were awarded this massive tender. It was up to us to look to her connections, and it appears that she is very well connected.
Jeff, as per the 280 Rand, and yes, I'm agreeing with you that on the base of it, it doesn't seem overtly sort of exorbitant, but our top comment on your article on the front page of News 24 at the moment from FAC Ut Godiem, I'm not quite sure of that username, but it reads, these golf shirts must be quite special, quote, at around 280 Rand each. The promo group offer branded golf shirts starting at around 85 Rand to 115 Rand rand, excluding VAT or VAT for bulk orders. Are the department buying enough T-shirts for all these people? I think that would probably require a whole new investigation just to go and see if whether or not those figures at the end of the day are perhaps maybe overbilled for the Department of Health. Thoughts there?
No, absolutely. But I mean, it speaks to issues with the within the way in which we procure our goods. So we will work on a tender system, and all of the individual companies will tender with their prices. And clearly, I mean, we asked the Gauteng Department of Health to see the base paperwork for this tender, and without any sort of surprise, they refused. But it's very difficult for us to assess value for money. And that's where the focus needs to be when the state procures its goods, is value for money, because over and over again, we see procurement in which items are bought by the state at vastly inflated prices. And, we had an instance where we were dealing with an assassination of a Transnet whistleblower that took a spring, which was valued at 3 rand, and sold that on to Transnet for 152 rand. What that does is that takes a 25,000 rand procurement and makes it a 1.2 million rand procurement. So this is the unending trope that we see over and over again in the way that the state procures its goods. And if we are to get value for money, and, especially in the Gauteng Department of Health setting, where there will be a funding shortfall because of the aid cuts, we have to spend our money properly. And it's not as if to say, we shouldn't be giving uniforms to the health department staff. Of course, they must have the uniforms. But the way in which these products are purchased must yield maximum value so that money can be used for its intended purpose. And that's treating poor patients. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that this is happening in a province where the public health sector and our hospitals are falling apart because of mismanagement and a lack of funds. There are austerity measures across the board. The Gauteng Department of Health struggles to remain liquid. And if we give tenders and the contractors cannot deliver, that's fruitless and wasteful expenditure. That goes into the audits, and it doesn't paint a pleasing picture of the health of that department.
Of course, corruption on the face of it, when you compare it to the worst of the 9 so-called wasted years under state capture and the Zuma administrations, of course, we were dealing with billions and billions of lost taxpayer funds. And here someone might come along and say, oh, well, it's just 2.5 million rand. And clearly in this businesswoman's mind, she thinks along those lines, because when you bring the proof that her company had been deregistered, she sort of responds with this very illuminating quote saying, I, quote unquote, I can defend myself. I'm in Ward 23 branch of the ANC and my business is manufacturing and textiles. But here's the kicker. It's not as if I got a tender to build a road. Imagine that. As if to say to compare along the lines of this, to say it's not a huge tender, so what? Is that the idea that you got from her?
Yeah, I think the point she was trying to make is that there's nothing untoward that she got this tender. She was trying to make the point that she was always in textile, and it's not as if she's operating outside of her sphere of focus. But I think the issue that we need to speak about, and we must strike to the root of the problem, it's procurement. And state capture, in the way everyone recognizes it or remembers it, as grandiose figures with clearly definable villains stealing money at the top level of SOEs. State capture continues to this day. It is ongoing, and it's ongoing through your public libraries, your municipalities, your provincial governments, your hospitals. You see it anywhere that has a SCM office and that is controlled by human beings. That's the weak point. That's where the system is fallible. And it can be exploited. And we see it with low value, high volume orders. Again, in this case, 280 rand for a shirt doesn't seem obnoxious. Turn that into a 8,500 quantity order, things are looking a lot more fruitful. Again, if we order another 8,500 shirts next year with annual adjustment for price inflation, that's more millions. So the numbers keep going up. And that's where the problematic aspect worms its way in.
And Jeff, just to prove your point, the Gauteng Health Department just did indicate to you that 280 Rand per shirt cost manufacturing that was put into the tender details that the businesswoman had agreed to in getting this deal, that figure in itself could fluctuate as well, which may then thus push up the 2.5 million Rand overall figure for this deal upwards or perhaps downwards. But I mean, evidence in the past always seemingly shows that it goes upwards.
Yeah, there's nothing to indicate that the prices will be going down in this matter. And again, I just find it very queer that someone so close to the MEC for Health would be so brazen in showcasing their so-called non-friendship. If we look at the Facebook posts, these women are close. They're up in each other's faces. There's a picture that Miss Mothobuka posted on her Facebook of the MEC spinning the decks at a party, taking to the DJ booth.
Nice.
So this is not the conduct of people who are not friends or are not known to one another. So whatever the explanation is, I think it'll fall down on its short legs.
What did the department say, if anything, to respond to your investigations, to your findings? I found, as per your reportage, some of the sort of reasoning was that, the MEC also is close to journalists. That's sort of the idea that was being perpetuated in some of the official responses you were getting from the MEC's department.
Yeah, so I mean, I also tried to make sense of the MEC's response, trying to explain away the Facebook photos, really, because we put those photographs to her, and that was her response, to say that she's a friendly woman who has close relationships with many people that she meets, including journalists. I mean, I'm a journalist. I attend events all the time. I can't remember a single instance where I've hugged an MEC. That's not something that we do. That notwithstanding,
100%.
That notwithstanding, I think that excuse is rather thin. And at the very least, the award of this tender needs to be examined by an external party.
Just to end off, this investigation is not directly, and correct me if I'm wrong here, linked to any of the evidence that was uncovered by slain whistleblower Babita Diekaran, but more or less influenced or inspired by, for journalists like yourself to take a little bit closer at the health department's inner workings, if you will. Is that correct in saying?
This is our continued drive to keep the Gauteng Health Department accountable. The reality is, Graeme, that we have a public health network that is on its last legs. We're struggling to spend our infrastructure budget. Hospitals are dilapidated and falling apart, and it's the patients who suffer. At the end of the day, there's several million people who rely on hospitals and clinics in this province for care every single year. And we will aggressively keep the leaders of the Gauteng Health Department accountable whenever they spend public money. And that's what we've done in this case. And this is not something that I've ever kept a secret. I was set on the spoor by what Babita Diekaran found, and the depth and scale of the corruption at one hospital really edified me in many ways to say, well, this is how the modus operandi works, and now we see it. And we've made it clear to the Gauteng Department of Health, including the MEC, that she's being watched. We continue to watch her, and they must be very careful how they spend their money, because it doesn't happen in a void.
And I thought it quite illuminating that herself could not respond to your specific questions. Instead, she gets her spokesperson or media department officials there to sort of respond. That's not always the case. I mean, an MEC should be knowing what's happening in their particular department. They should be briefed all the time. They should have the knowledge of the inner workings. That should be something that we expect of people in government these days, no?
Absolutely. I think we hold our public office bearers and our politicians to a very low standard. And part of the reason for that is, when you look at the case of the Gauteng Department of Health, is they're just so riven by scandal for so long. I mean, depending on how long you could go back to 2007, the sort of original sin of the Gauteng Department of Health with its MEC Brian Hlongwa, taking kickbacks and the like. And that has just happened continuously, unabated, up until where we find ourselves today. The point being is that they are enjoined to provide medical care for millions of the poorest of South Africans. Key in doing that is managing their money well, which they cannot do. So we will help them. We will help point out to them where they may have gone wrong. And Graeme, truth be told, I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope Miss Mothobuka delivers on this tender. I hope she drops her prices year on year and she does a patriotic South African thing. But time will be the true test.
And that's our specialist investigative journalist, Jeff Wicks. Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to your next reportage.
No worries. Thanks for having me, bro.
To our trending topic, and the DA is continuing for now as business as usual in the government of national unity, with the party's cabinet ministers reporting to their respective departments. But Deputy President Paul Mashatile claims he'd be quote-unquote ashamed to do this, affecting a budget that he didn't support. Mashatile, who was speaking at a business breakfast, was referring to last week's developments in Parliament, in which the DA had ditched the ANC-led national budget, looking to the courts now to interdict the May 1st VAT increase. Mashatile remarked that he doesn't know what the DA is thinking, allowing its cabinet ministers to work as per normal. The deputy president insists that President Cyril Ramaphosa engaged extensively with DA leader John Steenhuisen in the run-up to the vote, but to no avail. Mashatile, who had stated over the weekend that the DA's coalition position should not be exaggerated, says it's now up to the ANC's National Working Committee to decide on the DA's future in the GNU. Keep it here on The Lead for the very latest there. And finally, Beatles maniacs, mark your calendar for exactly 3 years from now. That's when 4 separate biopics of the Beatles' lives are set to be released. Actors Paul Mescal, Harris Dickinson, Barry Keoghan, and Joseph Quinn. They're all set to star as Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Ringo Starr, and George Harrison, respectively. Each of the films, directed by Sam Mendes of American Beauty fame, will focus on the Fab Four's lives. All of them are slated for an April 2028 release in close succession. But as News 24 reports, the Beatles are of course no strangers to the silver screen. More than 5 decades after their breakup, countless flicks, series and documentaries have attempted to retell the Liverpudlians' tale for each generation, including Yesterday and Nowhere Boy. But for the full back catalogue, check out journalist Joel Ontong's piece about Beatlemania 2.0 under the Arts and Entertainment section on News 24. From close-knit ANC t-shirt tenders to the next fab foray into cinema. That's been our show. We want your feedback. Mail your comments and voice notes to thelead@24.com, and be sure to subscribe to our show on Spotify and Apple by hitting the follow button. Daily episodes drop on News 24, Spotify and Apple Monday to Thursday like clockwork at 7 p.m. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer, and so long as there's news, we'll have the lead.